Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. And I'm glad to get a chance to talk to you about your art, your fine art, and your art supply company. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I'm so glad I could take part in this, Carolyn.
Thank you. And so I would love for you to start us off by telling our audience about your training and how your career evolved and what your art career, your fine art looks like today and how it fits together with your business.
Okay, well, when I was in college, I took an art class and really liked it, but I didn't want to major in that as my career. So I actually became a college professor in rhetoric and public speaking. And so for 32 years, I taught at a small college east of Seattle. I was involved in theater and there wasn't a whole lot of art going on, but my wife was quite involved in art, and she did oil painting and woodcuts and watercolor, and she's taken a whole lot of classes. And I made art here and there, but in 2014, I read a book by Camille Paglia called Glittering Images, which was an overview of Western art. And that really inspired me. And after I read that book, I just started making art like crazy. So I had an explosion of creativity. I think creativity is one of my dependable strengths. So I took some classes, and especially in collage, and the classes, it helped make up for some of my lack of professional training. I also took 2 weekend classes by an organization called Artist Trust here in Seattle, which promotes art education. So these were 3-day weekend classes, and I took the class twice, and it talked about how to become a serious artist. And so I took notes, I met people, I talked to them, and I did everything that they told me to do. And one of the first things they said is, if you want to be an artist, you have to have a body of work. So I started making lots of art. I counted up, I have about 900 pieces now. I also took pictures of everything. At first, I hired students to take pictures, and then I realized I could use my iPhone. So I've documented everything on my website. As a communication professor, I kind of know about writing and making public press releases and stuff like that. So I promoted my stuff on the website. But I think in terms of my art career, I have applied what I learned in the classes, and I submitted to shows. I got on all of the social media that I could, and then I started meeting artists, and so I learned from them. And now I'm just having a blast. My wife was dean of the business school. She retired 2 years ago, and we moved 2 hours away from east of Seattle to this island called Whidbey Island. And we bought an historic house, we renovated it. This space here is the daylight basement, and we've got 1,000 square feet down here. So one room is our storage for the lead art supply products and my art, and then I can make art here. So it's just a neat man cave for me. I can hang out, make art, and eventually I want to be able to have art walks or shows, weekend art shows here. And it's been a neat experience to retire and not have to worry about work and do our favorite things like hiking and art. We're just 2 blocks from the water here up on the hill, and we have a Tudor revival house, 1928 house that's been totally renovated. So we're just flabbergasted that we get to live here.
That sounds gorgeous. And so I love the space that you're in too. I mean, there's so much light there, and you said a ground floor walk-in for that basement, huh?
Well, we have to walk down some stairs. We built a new entrance.
Yeah, because it looks like you just...
We've got windows everywhere. I made bigger windows.
Yeah. You're not in a dungeon. You're in a ground floor basement.
Yeah, and the guy that did our electrical really knew how to make the lights. And I said I wanted to have, this is an art space, art gallery. So we made niches in the walls, and he made special lights for it. And just absolutely perfect. we just love this house.
Yeah, it sounds great. Well, if I get out there, I'm coming to see it. So, who does your website? I'm curious how you're doing as a communications professor, how you chose your website platform and how you do that one.
Okay, well, I was an early adopter of this site called blogger.com. And so I have about 10 different blogs or websites, that use that platform. So I'm quite familiar with it, and it's not probably the best, but I'm so good at it and I know how to use it that I've just stuck with that. And so I do it myself. I try to create pages for news, shows, residencies, and I also post all of my art there going back to 2014.
Excellent. Well, your work is very prolific, as we know, and you've had 60 shows, 20 awards, I'm sure, and counting. Getting published in 90 literary and art journals. Tell me about that. Tell me about getting into literary and art journals as a means to gaining exposure. You're obviously quite good at this.
Okay, well, when I took the Seattle Trust art education course, one of the things they said was, if you want exposure, go ahead and send into the art and literary magazines. And so I remembered that, and I found a website called Submittable. And with Submittable, you pay, it's either free or you pay like $3 to submit. And as an academic person, I was used to sending in articles to journals, and sometimes you get a rejection, but sometimes they accept it. So I've had a huge acceptance rate, like almost 50%. In fact, I keep going back to find stuff because they don't want art that has already been published. So it has to be unpublished. So I go back to 2014 and I kind of digitally enhance it and stuff like that. And I also try to think in terms of what the editor wants. So I look at the journal, I see what kind of art they like, and I say, oh, I've got some that look sort of like that. And so you send in like 3 to 10 pieces, and then it's sort of like fishing, because I watch the dashboard, and it will say, submitted, and it will say it's being looked at, and then sometimes it's denied, but then it says accepted. And so I've gotten into more than 90 publications, and it's just a lot of fun to know that my art's being viewed by, maybe not in a whole lot of galleries, but by far people are seeing it in the journals. And another thing that's neat about the journals is sometimes they pay you. And I've gotten on 11 covers. And usually when I get on a cover, they send me a check. So you get a check for like $10 or even $100. And that's neat. I mean, I'm retired. I don't really need to make money from my art. But when I do, it's sort of like icing on the cake. And it's just a lot of fun to see this happen. And on my bio, I can say that I'm in 90 journals, and so it sort of snowballs. People go, well, wait a minute, this must be good if that many people are using it. So I know about building resumes and developing a body of work that shows that I have a track record. And that's what I would recommend to anyone that wants to be an artist. You have to have a body of work, and you have to show that people like it enough to, either buy it or post it or have it in their journal. So that's been neat. And then also you can also do things like get awards and shows. So I've been in 60 shows, and that sounds impressive, but a lot of those shows were self-curated. So I knew, like, the librarian at our university. So I said, can I put up art here? And so we did, and I was in an art group in our community. And so sometimes our art group would do a show in the library. And I've been in hospitals, community centers, and libraries, and a lot of smaller venues that I get like one piece or more. And so that's how I got in there. I also joined the Northwest Collage Society, which was a lot of fun. And they have shows 4 times a year. And there's like 80 to 100 pieces, and they give awards away. So I've gotten maybe 8 awards from that. And that's kind of neat. And then there are online contests that you can apply to also. And sometimes the journals have awards for that you can get. So it's just another facet of building my resume is the awards element. And then I also link to everything. So when I say I'm in 60 shows, I actually I either have a detailed description or I have a link to what was there. And so you got shows, awards, and journals. And I'm just having a lot of fun doing this. Now that I'm not teaching, I can just focus on being creative, which is my favorite thing.
Yeah, me too. And I have a feeling most of our listeners feel the same way. So you said a bunch of interesting things. Now, when you get into an art journal, this is not a catalog of artwork for sale. This is a listing of people that are in your arena, your particular niche that have made art, or any fine artists in a particular area, or is it a region? How do the art journals work as far as what goes in it and its purpose and distribution?
Well, these are literary journals, literary and art journals. So the poets and the writers, they want to get published. And when they get published, it's like having a show for artists. And so there's maybe 200 or 300 art journals out there. Sometimes they're done by English departments at the universities, and sometimes they're just people that have MFAs in writing, and they're a bunch of friends, and they say, let's start a journal. And so sometimes they're online and sometimes they're print. And what's neat about that is you have your poem, and then they want to have some type of art to go with the poem, to pair with it, or the story. And that's how it works. And one of the first ones that I applied to was from the Mid-American Review, and they had a contest that you were supposed to submit a painting that matched a story that they posted. And so I already made this. I made a collage of a bird, sort of a Audubon bird, and I had sort of a ghostly bird, and then a live bird, and a skeleton, and an egg, and I called it Life Cycle. And it exactly fit the story of this couple that lost a child, and something like there was a frozen bird in the story and stuff. So I submitted it, and I won first place. I got like $500 prize. And then they actually sold prints of the work, and I got another $700 for it. So that was kind of a neat first experience with getting into the journals.
That's fantastic. And, it's funny because my mom is also a fine artist, and she loves to write. And she had written for a number of years on a website called Fan Story. And Fan Story would encourage artists to submit, or writers to get work from artists, visual artists, so that the other writers could take turns and they would all write a poem about a particular piece. And I didn't even really think about that, but I submitted. She said, do you have any artwork I can use? And I submitted one of my paintings. You're really making connections between how you can utilize the things that you create to connect with other artists, to get exposure. And I should go back. I know I have all the listings that she gave me of all of the poems that each person wrote about that piece of art. I should be putting those on my website and keeping that, because that counts. All of these things, these pieces of exposure, they all count.
Yeah, I think there is a genre of poems, I forget the name of it, where you make a poem based on a piece of art. There's another journal called 3 Elements, where they post 3 prompts for writers, and they have to write a story or a poem that includes the 3 words, and they publish quarterly. And so I got into that a couple times. So I haven't been 100% successful, but I've gotten a lot of almost all of my art, especially the figures, have been published.
I love the figures. I love your figure work. I love abstract expressionism. So I absolutely love your figure work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I like what you were talking about with regard to approaching different venues. So, businesses maybe, and libraries and different places that you might get your work displayed with or without a group. And I think that's an excellent venue to pursue getting exposure. I've heard of other people doing this. There have been people that I spoke to on the show about this. Jacob Ortanis comes to mind. So do you have, as a communications professor, do you have a system or a methodology for approaching these venues to say, hey, I'm an artist. I'd like to know if I can show here. Do you give them any assistance with regard to, here's how I do it, here's what I recommend, or do they have their own ideas? How does this all work? Because I like your kind of approach, really, of you don't ask, you don't get, right? You have to kind of get out there and put yourself out there and ask the question.
Yeah, I think what I've done is I've done searches. So there's call for art. The problem with call for art I found is that each time you submit is $35, but sometimes they have free things or low cost things, and you search for these venues and submit and hope that they accept you. I think networking is really crucial. So our public library down the street here, I have a show in there right now, and the librarian just loves it. I have my portraits in there now, and we were down there, and my wife's going to have a show of her woodcuts in September. So public libraries is a really good place. Usually they're putting up local artists. I've heard about coffee shops. I haven't actually been in a coffee shop, I don't think, but condos often have space for art. And so especially if you know someone that lives in the condo, that's an option. So I think networking, if you got a artist group that you're in, you can hear about opportunities like this. And I was in a group, it was called Venues for Working Artists in the east side of Seattle. And every month we would meet for coffee, and we'd talk about our art. We'd bring a piece of art and we'd discuss it. And the president of that, Crystal Edwards, she works at Microsoft, but she also had been in a gallery, and so she knew how to hang art. And we would develop places for shows. And I think networking is really crucial for finding opportunities. And then just searching, you can often find places to show. I've got a funny story about that. Do you want to hear it?
I do. I do.
Okay, well, I moved to Whidbey Island, and it's this long, narrow island in Puget Sound. And in the south of the island is Langley, which is an art community. And they have a lot of galleries down there. I don't know anyone there. I'm not involved so much in the art community there. I've talked to the gallery owners, but if they don't know you, it's a little bit harder, I think, to get in. I've submitted to them. I don't even get a rejection. So, okay. So I was searching, and I said, I should really try to get into one of the galleries in Langley. So I searched a Langley art, and I found the Langley Art Association, and they had a call that was free. So I submitted to it, and a few weeks later, I get an acceptance, but it turned out to be Langley, Canada, which is in British Columbia. And it's a totally different city.
Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? So now I was able to say in my press release that it was an international solo show.
That's right.
I brought the art up there. I had 20 pieces. The 3 women that are involved in art shows in their municipality were just thrilled. They loved it. And Teresa and I were able to do a little tour, a little vacation in Vancouver. And it was just so neat. And I I applied for Langley, but got into Canada, which I think is actually better.
I think it is. And now you can say you're an internationally successful artist.
Mm,
So I think we should all apply for Canada because we can drive there.
I bet you could, yes.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm far enough north to go ahead and do that too.
Well, I
Well,
thought actually that it would be hard bringing the art across the border because I actually got a piece in a show in the Vancouver Library. And I hired a student. I said, I don't have time to drive up there. Would you take this painting up there? And so he did. And when he got to the border, they said they kept him for 3 hours. And they said, did you know that smuggling art is a crime in Canada? And I didn't even think about anything like that. And he called, they were able to call the curator and get everything okay. But this time I went into the border people website and I got all of the forms, all the documents. And when I got to the border, they just waved me through. So it was a good experience.
that's really important. And I'm glad you brought that up because we wouldn't normally think of this as you didn't the first time around. And so the second time around, you were able to preempt any difficulties. And now our listeners can do the same. They can go to the Border Patrol website and find out what they need to do to facilitate transferring art across the border, which is a really good tip.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So your technique, I mean, the range is very interesting to me, going from mixed media, abstract expressionist, collage to portraits. So let's talk about your creative process and where your ideas come from.
Okay, well, I took classes at the Kirkland Arts Center in collage because that captivated me. And I took about 12 classes from an artist named Larry Culkins, who makes these collage type artifact type art pieces that are sold all over the country. And he sprays them with ink and he uses shellac, so it looks like they're ancient. And I just learned a whole bunch from him about making art that's not necessarily a pretty picture, but it has some type of meaning, like some type of artifact you might discover. And that became sort of key to my own interpretation. I will go into Pinterest and I save art that I like. And I have quite an extensive collection of art, on Pinterest. It's a repository of art that inspires me. And I'll take an abstract expressionist that I find is good, like Arshile Gorky or Paul Berlin, and I'll study these paintings and I'll try to create a piece of art that mimics it. And sometimes I'll take the art, I'll put it in a Word document, flip it and stretch it. And then I know what the colors are like. I know what the forms are like. And the other thing that makes my art unique is that I embed it with collage material. So especially up close, you see things you wouldn't see it normally with paint. So there are ads and there are crossword puzzles, and collage adds a lot of depth to meaning, and I'm able to make an undercoat that bleeds through so that it looks more like an artifact. But I think mostly my art ideas come from studying the artists that I admire and using them as a jumping off place. So I say it's sort of like standing on the shoulders of giants instead of just trying to throw paint on a canvas like you might think an abstract expressionist does. I find a painting that's successful and I use that as a guide. So I've been doing that for a long time and it's a lot of fun. I also had a class more recently with Miha Sarani, who is an MFA art historian, and now he's the director of the Kirkland Arts Center. And he's absolutely amazing talent, a young guy. And he likes to do portraits. He'll just take a pencil and he'll make a portrait with it, with his pen. And so that kind of inspired me because I had a class with him, and so we started doing portraits. And I developed a technique where I will copy a photo, that iconic photo of a rock star or musician or actor, I mean, and then I make it with layers of tissue so that it looks different than oil or acrylic. I'll use acrylic, but underneath is the tissue, and the final layer will be pink tissue, and then when I put the acrylic medium on it, it looks like skin, and it sort of glows. And so I developed this technique, and it's a lot of fun. I have a bright undercoat so that it shows through, and sometimes the ink in the orange tissue will bleed, and so it looks different than most things that you'd ever see. And so that's why I'm doing the portraits. I think when I did the portraits, I got a strong reaction from people that don't really get abstract paintings. It's like, okay, but when they see a face that they recognize, then oh, okay, I guess he's pretty good. He can do a realistic face. And I really do enjoy doing that. And I have a show right now of 20 different collaged portraits. And I've got some started here too. They're like this big, on little canvases.
And I'll be showing your artwork on the show notes page. We'll have the usual gallery collection of work so that our listeners can flip through and see what we're talking about, see some of the work that we're discussing. Are you continuing to run in both veins, or are you mostly focusing on one niche over the other at this point?
I'm just doing whatever I think I'm interested in, and I really love the abstract stuff. And I think that the journals prefer figures. And so a lot of times I think, maybe I should do another figure. So I'm working on one right now.
Now, do you find that for the journals, they want something, I'm a portrait artist as well. I do other things too, but a lot of my work, I love doing portraits, and a lot of my work has been portraits. Do you feel that it's harder to place those for journals because they're so specific and based in realism, that maybe that the venues feel that they're too specific to really attach to the journal or associate with a piece of writing, as opposed to these abstract expressionist pieces that are more flexible in their associations?
Yeah, I think that if you're doing a photo of, a portrait of an actual person, they want something that's more epic and more iconic, that can mean a lot of different things. And they don't want like a picture of Kurt Cobain or something like that, because then they're thinking, oh, am I going to violate a brand here? So it can't be somebody famous. Although I did get Carly Simon got accepted by somebody. So sometimes they do accept that. You have to look at the journal and see what kind of art they like. And a portrait might, a portrait like what you make might fit with what they like.
I like that. And the concept that you're reminding our listeners to go back, work backwards from what you've already seen them show in their journals. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a very good approach, so that you're factoring that in, and it can help you to match yourself up with a journal that's likely to accept you, as well, as opposed to just throwing spaghetti at the wall and see which journal accepts you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of poetry, it is sort of mysterious and ambiguous. And so I think they want a piece of art that is sort of like, what is this? It's like you look at it, it's, what the hell is this kind of a feel that some of my art is like. It's like, wait a minute, what is that? So it's got to be, usually it's not something that is immediately recognizable.
Well, again, with regard to the abstract expressionist work, I love the figures. I think if Giacometti, Kokoschka, and Braque had a baby, it's just really incredibly fascinating. And I love the style. I love the richness of the layers, the visual depth, and the meaning. You've got probably embedded layers of meaning, or meaning that people can associate with the work, just because it is so, it's kind of gritty, it's kind of got that feel of it's raw on some level. It's so expressive, and I like that. It's really, really, you see something different every time you look at it.
Yeah, I think that they say that artists are like the antenna of culture. And so they're anticipating what is happening in the culture and they don't even know what it means. So sometimes you make a piece of art that has sort of a mysterious what's going on here? I know there's something there, and that's what I try to aim for. And unlike people who have spent 30 years perfecting their craft so they can paint like a landscape that's just amazing, and I really admire that. It's more like folk art or art that isn't perfect, but it has some type of depth to it. And I often think of the voice of Bob Dylan. He's technically, his voice is not good. I mean, that the actual people that know about music, his voice technically is not good, but he's absolutely profound in his sincerity and authenticity. So that's kind of what I'm trying to aim for, something that's deeper than just the form, but trying to capture the inner meaning of something that maybe I don't even know what it means. But that's why I really like abstract expressionism. That it seems to have more than it's saying more than than is actually there.
Yes, it does. So, since you have retired and been able to focus largely on your creative pursuits, and you have the business, you've got Lita Art Supply, what has been the biggest challenge you faced in your art, your fine art career as it is now, and how did you tackle it?
Well, I think my biggest challenge was that I started late in life as an artist. So unlike people that went to art school and spent 20 or 30 years perfecting their craft, I didn't have the thousands of hours that are necessary to be fluent as an artist. And so to make up for that, I took classes. Like I said, I studied art. I've been to museums in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle, and I bring my sketchbook with me. Here's my sketchbook. I bring my sketch. We were just over in the museum in LaConner, Washington, over here where they have an art auction. And one of my pieces is there. So I was sketching, and I just immersed myself in art history and take classes. And I watch videos of artists that I admire, and trying to kind of make up for the fact that I didn't go to art school. A lot of the art classes are really good, and sometimes people think you have to get an MFA, but you don't really need to, because you can just take the classes that interest you, and then you just make the art. And so I've been doing that. Also, to make up for the fact that I started late, I chose a collage because I figured that if I was going to do oil or acrylic, it takes decades to be good at that. But with the collage, it can be more visceral and rough, like you said, and it's okay because it's more like folk art or outsider art. And so the collage element has helped. Another way that I've made up for starting late is I have relationships with other artists that help me and mentor me. And probably the most significant thing that has helped me is just having my wife, who's very into art. She understands art, or color theory, and she's done a lot of different types of art and taken a lot of classes over the years. So I started late. She's been doing it since high school, and she'll critique me. And so you have to have somebody that's willing to critique it. And so like I'll work on a piece and I'll say, okay, Teresa, what do you think? And she'll say, no, you got to get rid of this. Got to get rid of this black line here. You got to add some purple or something like that. So whatever she says, I'll do. And it's really saved a lot of my work. So you have to have somebody that can help mentor and guide you and critique your work. And those are things that have helped me make up for the fact that I started late. And that's the biggest challenge that I've had. And I'm still working on it.
Aren't we all? Yeah, I know my listeners have heard me say that my one complaint, I adore my husband. He's incredibly supportive. And one of my basically one complaint with him critiquing my work is that he's infallibly honest when something bothers him about the work, which is great. He will tell me no matter what, whether I want to hear it or not, he's going to be honest. And that's the good thing. But then he doesn't always often know how to tell me what's wrong with it in his eyes. So he'll say, I don't know what's wrong with it or how to fix it. It just doesn't look good.
Mhm.
And I'm like, thank you. Because where do you go from there? So we're working on that one. And I
Okay.
try to guide him on how to critique me and say, can you be specific? Can you bracket this and tell me, is it the form? Is it the shape or the line or the balance? And so we're working on communicating what of those things that he thinks might be off are bothering him so that he can guide me, because he's got a good eye. He just needs to be able to kind of be able to verbalize it.
Yeah, sometimes people don't have the terms and the language. They know that it's good, but they can't explain it, or they know there's a problem, but they don't have the background in it. But you still can get a lot of valuable information from people that aren't really educated in this.
Yeah, and he does have a good eye, and most of the time when he finds something's bothering him, I do change the piece. But then I've got to go in and really think about what it is that he's trying to tell me, because he has the objective eye. And the other thing I can definitely recommend is to my listeners, take photos as you finish each session. If you paint like I do my paintings in sessions. So I'll paint for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and then I'll take a break and then I'll come back to it. And at the end of each session, I've learned to take a photo, because I can tell you one of the most frustrating moments when my husband came into my studio was when he said, and he was right, but he said to me, something about the mouth. It looked better before. I liked the way you had it. And I thought, and I know he was right. There was something off, but I was trying to think, what was it before? It's not like a computer when you can just hit undo, and I had to go back and look and think that something was off. And then I was able to eventually come round to it. But if you take those periodic photos, the person that's helping you to see objectively can even point to it and say, that at this stage, the mouth was good, even though you weren't done with perhaps the eyes or something else. So that's helped me.
Using the camera is a great tool.
It is. And it is my absolute go-to at the end of sessions, or when I think I'm finished, is take that photo and then take a break. And when you're ready to really look at it, come back and look at the photos you've taken, because it's going to tell you if in fact it's done. It's going to be objective. And if you're honest with yourself, you're going to be able to look at it and say, you know what? I would submit this to a show right now, or something is going to jump out at you because of the flattening effect of that photo. You're going to be able to go, whoa, this thing over here is glaring. It needs attention that you might not have seen after standing in front of that piece of art for 4 hours straight. So It's going to be that objective voice.
Yeah, sometimes you make a piece and you fall in love with it, and the next day it doesn't look as good. Or sometimes I make a piece and I think, this isn't that good. And then like several months later, wait a minute, this is okay. And so having a larger perspective than the immediate response, I think, is helpful.
It is. And working on more than one piece at a time can help with that for sure, so that you can take a break and work on something else and go back to it and have that fresh eye. That's been something else that's been helpful to me.
I usually do 2 or 3 things at once.
Yes, absolutely. Now, tell me how do you sell your works outright on your website? Tell me, if you do, how do you set your pricing? Or is it strictly something that you look for exposure through shows and the journals, but you're not necessarily looking to sell unless someone asks you about a piece?
Yeah, selling has not been a super big priority for me, although I would like to sell. My website doesn't have the function for selling, which is hard. Um, if people want to buy, they'd have to contact me, which is one more barrier. Uh, but they have, I have sold things that way. I think I've sold. I was in a show at the Cascadia Art Museum in Edmonds, which is a suburb of Seattle, and the show was part of the Northwest Collage Society, and it was supposed to be inspired by the Northwest Mystics, which are Mark Tobey, Morris Graves, and Kenneth Callahan. And those guys, I love that type of art. So I had some stuff that I could use, and one of them was a picture of horses and abstract cubes and things that I kind of borrowed from Kenneth Callahan. And then another one was Kenneth Callahan has a sort of a ghostly figure in a rowboat with giant fish underneath of it. So I took that piece, I stretched it, and instead of a rowboat, I made the guy standing on a paddleboard, and I used the same colors and things. And the last day of the show, it sold. And then I got an award for the other one. So I like to sell, and I think maybe I'll be working on that in the future. Our gardener, Timothy Haggart, he's a professional artist also, and he does mowing yards to pay for his family. But he also is in all of the art walks, the fairs. He's going to be having a show at his house, and he's going to have 10 different artists there. It's all part of the Woodby Allen art that they're going to have. And so I think next year, Teresa and I might be involved in that. So the more you network with people, the more opportunities you find. I have been in a gallery in Kirkland in their, I wasn't actually physically in it, but I was on their online part of their website, and one of those got sold. So yeah, I've sold, but it's not like I'm making a living from it, because most of the money that I'm making from this is from my art supply company, Lita Art Supply, which I founded in 2016 and with a former student. And we've sold 100,000 sketchbooks throughout the world. We have a warehouse in Houston and a warehouse in Northern Ireland, and we're trying to improve our profitability, because it's very competitive out there. But oftentimes we rank ahead of Moleskine on Amazon, and we're coming out with a square size and a landscape size. So that will be neat. And that's the idea that the art supply company is owned and founded by an artist kind of helps our branding.
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's a level of trust there that artists have for people who are in the field, the assumption that they get it, they know the struggles, they know the pain, and really what an artist is looking for by way of supplies and material support. I have a couple of questions here, and one of them, before I ask you about the business, because I do have questions about that, is regarding you telling me that you do sometimes sell the work, kind of, I think, backwards, and that you're not expecting necessarily, not going into it with the purpose of selling, but then sometimes you'll end up selling a piece here and there. And that's kind of like icing on the cake for you, because you apparently don't realize how awesome your art is. So do you start going into those shows just in case with a concept of a price in mind, should somebody ask about it? Or do you just wing it when they come in and say, I have to have that. How much is it? And you go, and throw out a number.
Yeah, you need to really have a price. And when I met with our art group that I was telling you about, Crystal, who knows a lot about this stuff, she helped me come up with pricing, because it has to be based on sort of your level as an artist. Like I haven't been selling things worth thousands of dollars. I haven't. So I can't charge $1,000. So I'm more, and right now I'm at $340 for a 20 by 17 inch piece. And each year you add a little bit more, like $20 or $40 to match your experience. But I know that in selling Amazon products, you have to price it according to the market. So I'd love to sell my sketchbook for $30, but no one's going to buy it. So you have to price it in comparison to what are similar products. And as an artist, you have to be realistic. And so right now I got a small piece at the auction at the Northwest Museum of Art in LaConner over here. And the auction ends tonight, but I had to come up with a price. I didn't want to make it too low because I didn't want to make it sound cheap, but I came, and then the museum takes a percentage because it is an auction. So it turned out to be like $360 for one of these portraits that I made. And I think that there is training, or there is information on how to price art. I know when I took the art up to Canada, the curator said, well, take 50 cents per square inch and add something for how many years you've been doing it. When I did that, it was like, that puts it up into $1,000. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to buy it for $1,000. So pricing is tough, but there are people that you can go to for help on that. But I think pricing it according to the market is good. You don't want to underprice it because then it looks cheap, and you can't have more than it's worth. You can't be thousands and thousands of dollars like some of these highly successful people are. So I think other people might help with that answer more than me.
Well, I think you've given some interesting, valuable input in that you ask 50 people, trust me, having done this podcast so long, you ask 50 people how to price your work, you'll get 50 answers. So this is valuable in that people, our listeners in particular, can take the information that you're giving them right now and combine it with input from other artists that I've asked, because I ask almost everyone on the show about this, because there are so many different approaches. And my advice is to individually come up with a formula that works for you, that matches your comfort level. If you have a business advisor on some level that they might agree with, or you can combine with their input. And I like that idea in my own method of combining business advice with people's experience, with maybe going rates in your area or in your genre, with the added element of your intuition. Does this feel right to you? Because as artists, we often incorporate and respect that element of emotional input or intuitive input. The creative side does this feel right? So for me, I have a formula that I do use, but it's not as stiff as the word formula would probably indicate. It involves time, it involves materials, it involves the element of my experience level, which would incorporate the things you're talking about, how many years in the field. Again, you're going to think about what is the market going to be inputting into your pricing, and what is the demand for your particular art? Do you have an audience already in a gallery, or are you still getting out there, but you have tons of experience, or you have a certain pricing that you've already sold your paintings at? So there's all of these facets, and I think that all of them are legitimate. And I always recommend our artists, if they don't feel super secure in setting their own pricing, that they do tap a second source or an outside third party and say, hey, like some of these art coaches that I interview, what do you think about this? I'm thinking along these lines, and get that input, and then either incorporate it, go with it, Or see what your gut tells you when you get the feedback, and it may give you the answer you need as to, no, that doesn't work for me. And then you might know more clearly what does work for you. When you hear that feedback and they say, oh, no, I think your work should be $10,000 or $100. And you go, no, 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 that's not right. It should be this. Even sometimes just being able to gauge what your reaction is to the input you're getting from that person can also inform the collective formula that you might have for pricing your art.
That's interesting. So you're saying that our intuition as creators, as creative people, can often be helpful in pricing.
I think so. I do use the intuition, but I use it in every area of my life. So in college, I studied science and art at the same time. Definitely for half of my college education, I was in science and art at the same time. And I spent a number of years in science before I went to college. So for me, I like to combine both. I like to have a formula. I like to have a logic-based approach and something I can rely on that's very objective. And then I like to incorporate my intuition by really settling down and saying, okay, using a process that I've arrived at this number. Does that feel right? And respecting that element of it and saying to myself, I don't like to just rely on intuition, but coming back and respecting the feedback I get from myself when I review the results of my approach and say, does that feel okay? And the combination of those two things for me works. I recently had a commission that I wasn't prepared for. Somebody walked in. I was actually at my design job, my day job, which is a media specialist in design. And somebody came in and said, I had my paintings on my office wall. And they said, do you take commissions? And I said, yep. And they said, can you do a specific commission that would be about such and such size in this or that medium? And so they gave me the parameters of what they had in mind. And they said, can you give me a price? And I remembered the advice that I came by in the process of doing all these interviews, which is very helpful, which is do not, unless you're extremely confident in that price and have a lot of experience in that particular type of assignment, do not give the price immediately. Take a step back. The first thing is to step back and let yourself have that space of saying, I'll get back to you. And that's okay. The comfort level with being able to step back and saying, yes, I can give you a price. And no, I'm not going to give it to you right now. I will get back to you.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And that's hard. Artists, a lot of times, I think, can fall into wanting to people please. I'm not going to say across the board, everyone's different. But for me, that's something I had to watch out for, is to want this person to be happy with the answer because I'm flattered that they asked, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, I'll get back to you. Then I did get back to them that day because I knew actually the assignment was quite time pressing. It was for an upcoming event. I took a step back and I took a break and I actually typed up a quote. And that's something else I recommend, in that it helps you to step back. And for me, at least, all of these things are, this is what works for me. But to put on my business hat and put my logo on it, set it up as a form letter, because I didn't have at the time access to my normal forms that I would use because I wasn't actually in my home studio. It also made me realize I need to have my usual quote forms in Google Drive or something online so that I can grab it and download it with a quality logo. Should somebody walk in off the street and say, hey, I like the painting that you have in your office. So I was able to throw together a quote based on how I normally do it, but also based on feeling that, what, I'm so busy right now that if this person doesn't like this price, I can live with them walking away because of the deadline of this assignment. It was going to be due. I had about a month, but if you subtract making absolutely sure that this thing was framed and ready to go, that it's ready. I needed to know, given that deadline, that leaves me about 3 weeks to a really hard deadline. And I would want to come in early in case there was a problem, or God forbid, it got dropped on the floor before I handed it over, right? Something building at that disaster preparedness. Or the client said, you know what, I hate it, which isn't likely because you check in as you go. If it's a commission on a tight deadline, you're going to want to take photos and send them and say, progress report. This way they can go, whoa, 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 what's that frog in the corner? Or they hate purple, change it, something. So I was aiming for 2 weeks just in case. And given the price I gave them, I thought, I can live with this if they say, forget it. And so then I took a deep breath and I took the quote to them in person. But because I have a problem in my own self often with that wanting to please and wanting to make the other person comfortable, often at the expense of myself as an artist in the moment, in person, I typed it up, I put it in an envelope, and I walked it to them and I handed them the quote. And they said, oh, that was quick. So here I took a couple hours. They're thinking it's the same day. It's quick. It's hand delivered. And I busied myself with looking at the photos on their office walls while they looked at this quote. I said nothing. I let this typed up quote speak for me and decided that that's legitimate. And you know what it was? And the client looked at it. And as I was wandering around their office, he nodded and he said, you know what? That's about exactly what I expected. Mm-hmm. And I thought, phew, but I could live with it either way at that point. And I think that's an indication if you run that through your filters. Can I live with this price if the person walks?
Oh,
and that may have to do with your position in your industry at that time. Do you have a lot of experience? Have you had a lot of commissions where at that point, if you don't get one more, you can be okay with it? If you're not, and you want, for instance, say the prestige of this particular or that particular assignment, you may quote lower in order to get another commission to put on your resume. But at the same time, depending on who that client is, they may expect a quote of a certain level, or they may not respect the quote. They may start thinking, gee, maybe I should have gone to someone else. Mm-hmm. And that actually factored into my pricing is, what will this person of this particular industry expect in coming to me so late in the process for a very quick turnaround, but a very high expectation of output? They're going to want to feel like they went to a pro because they need it on a tight turnaround, and they need to know for that tight turnaround, this person is likely to succeed with what they're hoping to receive in exchange for the price.
So do you think that you had a high price and that impressed him, or?
I think I was lucky in that it was a higher price than I normally in my past, based on the past commissions, would have been comfortable putting out there. But it felt like the right price for the assignment. So I don't think it was a high price. I think my old self, who was afraid to ask for what I was worth, would have said, gee, you're going to ask for that? And I thought, ironically, the fact that I would consider that possibly a high price probably indicates that I'm actually on the right track for what it's worth. Because I know, I'm going to say to our listeners that part of my confirmation and experience in learning to price myself properly was knowing myself and knowing that one of my weaknesses had been underpricing myself. So I was able to take what I came up with and then raise it a little bit and say, okay, maybe I think of my friend. What would she price this assignment at? And what would she think if she saw this commission? Would she say that price is accurate, or would she go, come on, Caroline, that's not accurate. That's below what you're worth. So if you're self-conscious, try thinking about what somebody that you respect that's in the industry would price that work themselves. Is your work comparable in quality and experience and pricing history? And what would they tell you if you gave them that price, knowing you and being a supportive person, someone that knows your work and knows you as a person, that you know that they care about you and about your pricing yourself at what you're worth? So that can help to step outside yourself and be more objective. don't stay in your own head so much. Try and put on the hat of somebody else that would be looking at this for you, that cares about you. And as a professional, not just your mom who's going to say, oh, it's worth $1 million, thanks, mom. But that helped me. And the fact that this person, I didn't want to overprice it because this person has a high standing in their industry, but I wanted to price it knowing that being the case, this person would respect me for not giving them too low of a price. That factoring that in without just inflating a price because of who this person is. Basically, the combination of those things, putting them together and being able to do so because I took a step back and said, okay, let me think about client expectations, deadline, the pressure this is putting on me, my current schedule, my ability to deliver, how and when I'm going to be able to deliver. Am I going to have to not sleep for 4 days because of this deadline? Which wasn't the case, but I had to really be very intentional about my time until that assignment was completed. So those things all factor in, I think, especially on commission work.
Okay. Yeah, I know that in education, we have something called best practices.
Yes.
Where you learn field what other people are doing, and you can learn that easily online or talking to people like you.
Yes. And actually, at the time, I did send out 2 emails when I got the unexpected commission because I felt that I needed to give this person an answer same day. I felt that because of the turnaround, if I didn't produce an answer, and hopefully the right answer for this person's comfort level, that they would have to go to someone else because they needed this to get done. So I did email a colleague. I thought about her and what she would do, and then I emailed her. And luckily, she responded right away. And I emailed a business coach of mine who I felt would give me some of the support I needed to take that step. And they didn't come back with a price. I knew they wouldn't, because they said, the price that you're going to need to charge. They gave me really license to step up to trust my own feeling on what is the right price. But they said, make sure that you respect what you're worth. So they gave me that kind of boost. And I think those things are important and valid.
Well, that's good. I know that we have multiple intelligences, and creative people often lack on the business practical side. And so you need to have friends that can come by your side and help you. And I know that for me, I have my partner, Kyle Hamer, is a former student. He was one of my top debaters, and he's very good with business, and he's a business consultant now. So we're a pretty good team. I'm the creative side and he's the business side.
And that's perfect. And the flip side of thinking, what would my friend tell me I should charge, knowing the industry and maybe that slot in the art world that I'm fulfilling in this assignment, would be put on your best friend hat and think, this is another way to approach it. What would I tell this person if they called me with this commission under this deadline, knowing the quality of their work and the timeline and the pressure that they're under and the circumstances of the assignment? So that's a flip side. And those things, like you said, having Kyle to work with he wears a different mental hat than you do for most of the time. I have one of my podcast episodes is actually the analogy of changing hats, and it has to do with that. Take off your creative hat, your subjective hat, and put on your objective, what I call the objective hat, in being the business hat and the other way of thinking, left brain, right brain kind of analogy. So I think you are right on with the way that you are conducting and creating your business with someone who thinks differently than you do.
Yeah, you have to network. You have to have mentors.
And you have to know your weaknesses too and where your strengths lie.
You have to be humble too and listen.
That's huge. That's huge. And you have to be willing to take, I think, encouragement and compliments as well as constructive criticism. I think we fall down on that, where artists have trouble taking in what's being given to us, because even if it's a good thing, we are self-conscious or not confident, you know. So I think that humble, but at the same time being able to accept praise and encouragement, it's kind of a balance. So this business that we're talking about, tell me about, you have a program for people that will provide social media exposure for your business, right? And your products. Tell me about this incentive program.
Yes, we have a trusted creator program where if you have a social media presence, we will give you a product that you can give away as prizes, or have coupons that you can put on your website so that your fans can try this stuff. And the Trusted Creator program is all explained on the website. So we have Nathaniel, who's our social media guy, and he'll take a look at how many followers you have and stuff like that. And we'll send you free sketchbooks like this one, or paper pads like down there. And they're premium products. People love them. And usually when people try the sketchbook, they want to order again. So we would love to be able to send you some sample products that you can use as promotion. Just fill out the form and Nathaniel will get back to you. Yeah, we have an artist. His name is Jacob Daly, and he has a website called Daily Dots. And he actually contacted us because he absolutely loved the latest sketchbook. He just said, "This is by far better than Moleskine. This is the best sketch." He's just going on and on and on. It's like, okay. And so he was one of our first trusted creators, and he's been promoting it. He's been giving it away, and he's very enthusiastic about the products. You might want to try it and see if you like it. And
I'm going to. I can't wait.
Yeah, we'd love to have you involved, because social media is really one of the biggest ways that the word gets out nowadays.
Yes, it absolutely is. And before I ask you, we're coming up on time, but before I ask you our last question, I would love to know, I'm curious what you were saying about your business. And did you say that you have a location in Northern Ireland? How did that come about?
When I started this business, we sell on Amazon. So I took a course in it, and the more markets you sell, the better. So we launched in Europe. So we're in like 14 countries in Europe, and the way that it works with Amazon is you have to have a separate warehouse because Amazon doesn't want a warehouse. They want to sell it. They don't want to warehouse it. And so every time they need it, you ship in a few boxes, and then Amazon will put it in their warehouses throughout the country. So there might be like 4 sketchbooks in an Amazon warehouse near your house, so they can get it to you the next day. And so yeah, I designed the sketchbook, sourced it overseas in China and Malaysia, and we've been doing this for 7 years now, and it's exciting because there is a creative side to it. Yeah, so check it out. Lita Art Supply on Amazon. We also have our own website. It's a Shopify page, so we sell on both platforms.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to be linking up to that too. I want our listeners to be able to find your Trusted Creator program and naturally your website itself to check out your products and find out more.
Good.
So, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so excited to meet you and to share your amazing work with all of our listeners. And I would love for you to wrap us up with your best advice for the artists listening who want to gain exposure for the art that they create.
Well, I would say get on all the social media that you can: Pinterest, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You might want to begin with just one because it can be overwhelming. Probably the easiest way to market would be on Etsy because they already have a large audience. that are going to Etsy, and it's not very expensive. So I would say network, join art organizations, listen to people that are more experienced. It's something that is going to take work, and it's not going to happen immediately, but it begins to snowball. And the more exposure you get, it only makes you look better for other areas. And so, yeah, I would say social media, networking, taking classes, doing your own independent research, all of those things will help you improve your position as an artist.